Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Unraveling Politics, a weekly political analysis show. If you're new, I cover some of the news that was in politics in the last week, and if I have time, I look ahead to the future. As always, please give it a like if you like it, and subscribe as well. Normally, I don't sound like this. My voice is a little bit used. It has not been great, so we'll see how far along I get into this. So the theme of this week is how fucked up the week was, and we're going to start with the least crazy, and we're going to get worse as we go deeper. So I will begin with what would have been some potentially good news with everything in the war in Iran, and this was bound to change, and indeed it did. I've already changed the script several times, and that's very annoying, but that's how this administration has been. One of the things about the Trump administration I've not liked is that it has not been predictable, so therefore I have to keep changing things over and over again. But anyway, on Friday, Iran announced the Strait of Hormuz was reopened for the duration of the ceasefire. President Trump said that the blockade continued. Then Iran closed the strait again, even firing at vessels. However, as I've said before, even if the war does end today, a lot of damage has already been done to infrastructure and will persist for years to come. And there are already gas shortages in Asia, which will need filling up very fast once the war does end. And notably is not in China. So if anyone who is thinking, oh, well, this will also hurt China, nope, China has roughly 3 months worth of domestic demand in the stockpile, so they are good for quite some time. Oil closed on Friday just above $90 a barrel, which was the lowest in about a month. As of this recording, we have not yet seen the oil markets reopen. I imagine because the war continues that it will go back up to $100 a barrel, although that remains to be seen. And as of right now, the ceasefire is supposed to end on April 22nd, which is Wednesday, but President Trump seemed to hint that the ceasefire will not be extended. And I don't think it will be extended, but things will change, and you will know, depending on when you watch this. A lot of people watch this later in the week, so that is what I'm expecting, is that things will change. What is likely to change is how countries pursue energy policies in the future. And I think eventually the Persian Gulf will no longer be a large energy producing region. I think it will be in the short term, but countries will work to wean themselves out of this, just like many did with Russian oil after the war in Ukraine. They will either move to renewables or find oil elsewhere. Switching over to Congress, and this is kind of where we begin our descent down the rabbit hole, we learned last week that 2 congressmen have resigned, Tony Gonzalez and Eric Swalwell, and I talked about the former on the show before, but not the latter. Gonzalez had an affair with a staffer. I've already talked about this a few weeks ago. He had already dropped out of the race for re-election, so he was heading out of Congress after this year anyway. But now there is a vacancy. Eric Swalwell had a much more serious case. He's been accused of things. I'm not sure I'm allowed to say them on YouTube, but it begins with an R and it rhymes with grape. So he's facing a criminal investigation. He was running for governor of California. He has dropped out of that race, so his political career is over. And as of today, it remains unclear when there will be a special election to replace Tony Gonzalez. It will probably be in November. That is what I am thinking, although we are not totally sure. The one to replace Eric Swalwell will be in August, so it will be vacant for the duration of the summer. There are 2 other Congress people. One of them is Sheila Sherfilis McCormick. I've talked about her before. She robbed the federal government of over $5 million. And used the money, this is allegedly, by the way, used it to enrich herself. Corey Mills is another one. He's a Republican. They're both from Florida. He has faced sexual misconduct allegations, questions about his military record, financial misconduct, and many other things. And I think there is a good chance that these 2 will stick around. It's too soon to say. Unlike the previous 2, they are seeking re-election this year in their state of Florida. And the primary is not until August, so there is time for things to change to see if they are defeated. If that's the case, then I do expect the outrage to die down a little bit. For a while, I thought that neither of them would be expelled, but it appears that there will be a vote tomorrow on Tuesday, the 21st, to expel Sherfilis McCormick from Congress. 2/3 of Congress is required to expel a member, so it would require roughly 70 of Democrats to cross the aisle and vote with Republicans. And I suspect she will be expelled if she does not resign. And once again, things can change fast. If Republicans refuse to expel Mills, which it looks like they are, then Democrats might support Sherfilis McCormick. I hope Democrats do the right thing and just get rid of her, because she isn't a wicked woman. So is he, but they only really have control over her. So as for Corey Mills, it's too soon to say. As I said, Republicans look like they are going to try to protect him, probably for partisan reasons. But if I were in Democratic leadership, I would expel Sherfilis McCormick no matter what. So what does this mean to the balance of power? Well, we were previously at 219 to 214. A Democrat was just elected in New Jersey, so that will take Democrats up to 219 to 215. However, Gonzalez and Swalwell were both Republican and Democratic, respectively, so we're now down to 218 to 214, and Republican leadership can only lose one vote and still pass legislation. If the other two resign or are expelled, then that will go down even more. However, the interesting thing is the potential special election to replace Gonzalez. Swalwell is in a safe Democratic district with an election in August, so don't expect that to be an interesting race. Gonzalez is in a potentially flippable district. Democrats have done very well in special elections, but they are yet to flip a Republican-held seat. It is a district that President Trump won by 14 points. Normally, I would say that this is a safe Republican district, but theoretically, this could flip to Democrats because Democrats have overperformed margins. They've done 15, 16, 17, 18, even over 20 points. So this could flip, and I believe it would actually flip. So the dilemma for Governor Abbott in Texas, who sets the date for the election, is to hold it quickly. That he could do one thing is hold it quickly and hope that a Republican is elected and potentially risk a Democrat winning, or take the safe route and delay additional few months and hold the election in November along with the midterm elections. And that would mean Republicans are down an additional seat until November, while eventually that Democrat would be replaced. So, and by the way, this district would flip anyway because everyone will be voting for governor and for Senate in that district. So I'm pretty sure if it was held in November, it would still flip. So I think waiting is probably the best bet because I would put a 80% chance that Republicans lose this district. So back to the White House. Trump seemingly implied that we might be invading Greenland again. To quote a friend of mine, Jesus never a calm week. He knows who he is. The stupidest part about this is we already have several military bases on the island, and the fact we closed down a few of them after the Cold War ended. So I don't understand what all the aggravation is about. Somewhat ominously, President Trump posted, I believe at the start of last week in all caps, NATO wasn't there when we needed them, and they won't be there if we need them again. Remember Greenland, that big poorly run piece of ice, President GJT. And so this is referring to the war in Iran, and many are wondering if Trump is going to attack Greenland. And I think an invasion of Greenland would almost certainly end his presidency. And I don't think Republicans would tolerate that. An invasion of Cuba, sure, and President Trump hasn't ruled out an invasion of Cuba. I think that could be the next place where we go. I don't think he would invade Greenland, but the chances are worryingly high. I think that if he were to attempt an invasion, the sooner the better. Invading before the midterms would mean with Republican leadership in control, they probably wouldn't try to remove him from office. If Democrats are in charge, they would probably do it, and then that would force Republicans to make a vote. And then we had Pete Hegseth. He quoted the Bible from a verse from a movie, not the actual Bible. He said, the path of the downed aviator is beset on all sides by the iniquities of the flesh and the tyranny of evil men. Blessed is he who, in the name of camaraderie and duty, shepherd of the lost valley through the darkness, for he is truly his brother's keeper and the finder of his lost children. And I will strike upon thee with great vengeance and furious anger those who attempt to capture and destroy my brother. And all of you know my call sign is Sandy1 when I lay my vengeance upon thee. Amen. Which is awfully similar to the movie Pulp Fiction, which features Samuel L. Jackson. I don't know which is worse. Take your side and let me know in the comments. Either that he misquoted the Bible while claiming to be a Christian, or that he was reciting a prayer in a government building as a government official to begin with. And why is this happening in the Pentagon? The optics for this are really bad because Iran is a Muslim country. Invoking Christian and Jewish scripture in a war against Muslims sounds like you're making this a holy war, not a war for whatever the reasons are. Even Bush, I don't think, did that in Iraq. Yeah, we know he was a Christian or pretended to be a Christian for political purposes, but he didn't do this openly, as far as I know. And I know Tony Blair, he took precautions not to make the Iraq war look like a religious war. So in another move, Trump had a public feud with the Pope this week. Tensions have been building for quite some time, but this is the worst it has ever been. And the irony is Pope Leo is the first American Pope. Pope Leo, the head of the Catholic Church, called for peace in Iran and said God does not bless any conflict. And President Trump escalated by saying that Pope Leo is weak on crime and terrible for foreign policy. And at the same time, Pope Leo canceled his planned visit to America this year, and he's doing a trip as we speak around Africa for 11 days. He was originally invited to the 250th anniversary of America on July 1st or 4th, and this year he will be in Lampedusa. And I have a feeling Pope Leo will not be on American soil again until President Trump and J.D. Vance have left office, which I think is quite a shame. And I think Vice President Vance's comments on Tuesday last week was quite disgusting, and J.D. Vance is a Catholic himself, saying that the Pope, quote, needs to be careful when he talks about matters of theology. Considering that Pope Leo is 70 years old, he is 30 years older than J.D. Vance, and he is the Pope, he has a strong voice of authority over theology, much more than Vice President J.D. Vance, aged 41. And I think J.D. Vance needs to show some more respect. That's what I think. Anyway, what do I think about this? Ultimately, I think Trump needs to ignore the Pope. There's little evidence considering Americans are looking to what the Pope thinks and when they vote, and he needs to be focusing on supporting Americans, not fighting foreign battles, either metaphorical or literal. And as for the Pope, he is supposed to be the vicar of Christ on earth. He has a lot of soft power, which means influence over world leaders and events, hence why he's going to Africa. So as for President Trump, attacking the Pope is yet another sign of eroding institutions and trust, even in the most holy thing in the Western world. As I'm sure you know, the irony is this all comes as Trump posted an AI image of himself as Jesus Christ. And if you haven't seen it yet, here it is. The backlash was bad, and that was unlike anything I had ever seen before, especially from the right. The left obviously mocked it, even Iran mocked it, and the right didn't like it either. Trump then said he thought that it was a doctor in the image, which he also mocked. So once again, take your pick. Either he is a Christian and he pretended to be Jesus, or he's a Christian and doesn't know what that image was supposed to be. So that's up to you to decide. So we have reached the bottom. What was the worst thing? We reached the bottom of the pit of hell. On Friday and Saturday morning, late in the evening, as I was putting this episode together, Trump dumped a batch of posts on us about the 2016 election being rigged against him. Yes, it was the 2016 election, not the 2020 election. He said that Hillary worked to plant a Russian collusion story and that the Mueller probe broke rules and came out to get him. And I don't know what the specific allegations were, but we do know that Russia interfered in our presidential elections in 2016 and 2020. 2024 remains unclear, although I would be willing to bet they had some influence there. In 2016, they ran a large-scale social media influence campaign via Russian troll farms seeking to divide the American public, and they were successful. This came out in the Mueller report, the Senate Intelligence Committee, and the U.S. Intelligence Community Assessment. In 2020, they spread false information and sowed doubts about mail-in voting. This was all in FBI and DHS briefings. This all doesn't mean that votes were changed or that machines were hacked, but it does show that voters' opinions changed. And Hillary Clinton actually brought this up in the 2016 presidential debates. In the second debate on October 9, 2016, and on the third debate October 19, 2016, she was referring to a government document that had already been produced. We didn't know the full details until the Mueller report came out 3 years later, but the signs were there. People at the time dismissed her, but she was right. Instead of saying Trump was right about everything, I'll start saying that Hillary was right about everything. And I'll also add that Russia also targeted the 2017 French presidential election, the Brexit vote, Germany's 2015 and 2017 elections, and elections in Ukraine, of course, hence why they want elections in Ukraine. So it's nothing unique about America. And Hillary knew in advance of public opinion, which is one of the reasons I think she would have been a great president. And the scary thing is, we now, unlike in 2016 and 2020, is we have AI that can completely flood the zone. And that's going to get worse in the years ahead. And that is why it's important to double check information, folks. And that is what I do on the show to the best of my ability. So that is all for now. As always, please let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Bye-bye.